As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trumm and Katherine Fry have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. What they both know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. In a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and we'll discuss and share what has contributed to both our success and struggles, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. Hi, Katherine. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jen. At time of recording, it's Monday morning. I love starting my Mondays with you. How are you?
Love it as well. Love it. Love starting Mondays with you as well. And I'm doing really, really well. I'm excited to be here. I'm still feeling the energy from last Monday.
Woo!
So last Monday's episode 11. If you have not listened or watched it, please do. It was the morning of the eclipse. We were both feeling that energy during the episode. I took the day off, as I think I shared with you, for several days that week, but taking that day off ended up being one of the best decisions ever. It was like being able to experience that eclipse from Oregon, right? So all I got to see was 20% of it. But what was so amazing, and I was sharing this with you in our pre-show yesterday, was that we have these eclipse glasses that we saved from the 2017 total eclipse that we saw. So I ran to the park, and even at 20%, I got to see some mommies and their kids, and some people got to try the glasses. And so that was pretty fun. And then I came back here, and my husband and I, we sat on our bed, or laid on our bed really, and we watched the eclipse from city after city after city throughout the United States as it went to totality. And it was just, I can't even explain to you, like not even being able to be there with all the people who were experiencing it, but I was feeling it. Like I'm an empath. I think I've made that perfectly clear. But it's like I was feeling it. Like you were in Dallas, and then you were in Indiana, and then you were in Vermont. And it's like I have a friend in Vermont, and he was in the path of totality, but his family, so he works in the path of totality. His family lives 40 minutes away. He experienced something very different than his family did. And it's like, I think there is something about being in the path of totality. So it was a very amazing day. And then the rest of the week was a little bit up and down. I think, I don't know about you, but most people I know are still kind of feeling that energy. Like it's like either it's like high or it's low, but something about
that's so interesting.
Something about April has been some definite energy going on. I don't know. Have you noticed it?
I mean, all I can say is last week was kick ass for me. I had like a really great week. I did some, I started with a new client, a law firm. So
Nice.
Yeah, I did a half day training with them, and I was just on cloud 9. So I don't know, but I've been kind of riding this high for a while, and I'm going to hold on to it and do everything I can to keep riding this high.
Well, one thing that's still coming up in this month of April, and why I've heard a few different times that people are saying, hey, there's something about this month of April, not only with the eclipse, but we have what's called a palindrome, right? So palindrome is where you've got 4-2, so April 20th.
Yes.
And then 2-4 at the end. So it starts and ends with the same numbers. And for 10 days in a row, it's going to have, so I think that's super cool too. So like this month is kind of like, oh, a lot of exciting stuff going on. So anyway, well, let's jump right in. Today's episode, we are like super excited for this one. It is Say the Right Thing, the art of knowing when to coach, advise, or direct. How are you feeling about today's episode, Katherine? Let's hear it.
You know, I was thinking about, it's like not the sexiest topic, but the deeper I dove into this, the more I realized how important this topic is. Truly. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really is. And, we talked pre-show about it. I think it's something that we'll talk about during the episode, but we really, I think, thought that we knew what each meant. And I think over the years, especially in the last couple years, I think both of us have had some gut checks and they have not always been pleasant.
Nope.
Around like not always really understanding one from the other. And like even going to in prepping for the episode today, we went in and we looked at the definitions. I went to good old Webster and I
Yeah.
was not really happy with what Webster is telling me based on like how much things have evolved over the last several years. So yeah, it's like I want to be able to like give our listeners and viewers the most accurate like information as possible. But I
Right.
also want to put out there that there is some evolving that's happening in the field of HR,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So for us all to understand that, for us to kind of be compassionate with that and recognize that as we kind of work through these different terms, coaching, advising, and directing, and understanding that we're kind of still figuring out some things. We're kind of retweaking along with everyone else because these are words that are evolving with the times.
Mm.
That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. And it is so fascinating when you have been operating with a definition for so long that you believe it to be fact. And then all of a sudden your mind is blown when you realize maybe there's 17 other definitions out there. And you've been thinking that coaching is one thing. Somebody else has been thinking it's the same thing and it's the same word. So no wonder there's so many variations of it. And I mean, that's just a takeaway right there that in order to clarify what approach you're talking about, when you take today's episode, for example, and you apply it in the workplace, if you're maybe you're an HRBP and somebody is saying, I want to coach the employee, you have to get crystal clear on what they mean by coaching and what you mean by coaching. So you're speaking the same language.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's get right in.
Let's do
Let's
it.
go ahead and
Let's do
jump
it.
into the question. So, first question is for you, Catherine. I mean, you kind of already started answering your question.
I did.
How do you define coaching, advising, and directing?
Okay. So I'm going to keep it really simple. For me, directing is telling someone what to do. You're being very direct and you are literally saying, I think about open enrollment. Check this box to get the HDHP, right? Check this box for the traditional PPO. Like that to me is directing.
Yeah.
Advising.
So good. That's such a good way to describe it. We know benefits.
We know benefits. And I was trying to think of like, when is directing appropriate?
Yeah.
The only time I could think of was an open enrollment. But even still, never mind. I don't want to get off track. Advising. So advising for me is, here's how I would do it. Keeping it simple. And then coaching, this is what I didn't understand about coaching. Coaching, the way I understand it now, is really asking questions in a way to help somebody else come up with the solution or the path forward that's right for them.
Damn.
Tell me your definitions.
Well said. Yeah, so directing, I definitely agree. It's about telling another what to do and how to do it, right? It's like that the analogy around fishing, right? You take them to fish, show them how to fish. And I think directing is really just about that. It's about specifically directing and delegating in that way. Then you've got advising. And I like how you explain that. It's like, this is what I would do. Right. Or it can be, this is what others have done. This is, it's really more about here's what I think you should do.
Yes.
Here's why I think you should do it.
Yes.
Here's why other people are doing it. Here's, so basically it's kind of putting then that answer to, you're kind of giving this platter to them and saying, here's your answer. And coaching
Run
is,
away with, go ahead, do it this way. Have at
yeah,
it.
exactly. Exactly. And then my experience with coaching is it's a collaborative joint, yeah, I mean, there's so many words that could come up for me, but it's like really, like you said, it's finding that answer on their own. I think the best possible coaching is the kind that just truly brings it out when you didn't even know it existed, right? You're like,
Right.
whoa,
Yes.
that's what I could be capable of, or that's possible. That's coaching, right? And I think that that's only, that's kind of an extreme version, but really it can be anywhere in between. It's like a spectrum. And coaching is about like looking outside the box and then really being able to have that individual own it because they are bought into the why. They are truly invested in it. And now you are jointly moving towards something pretty amazing. So, yeah, and I think that is like really when, we do a poll every week. I did it in the Facebook group and I think I forgot. No, I did it in LinkedIn too, but I forgot to look at the results. So that's totally my bad, everybody. But every week we do a poll. And this week I just made it super simple. And I just
Uh-huh.
said, in your HR profession, where do you lean more towards coaching, advising, and directing? So, Katherine, did you have a chance to look at either of the polls and see where the results came out?
I did not look in recent days. I checked it out. I
Okay.
think it was either Friday or Saturday. And what
Okay.
I found to be really interesting is the majority of people said coaching. I mean, coaching is what I heard, what I
Yeah.
saw, that the
Yeah.
majority. But what I also found in the responses is that our definition of coaching varies greatly.
Yeah, I'd be interested too. Yeah, definitely. And I think for what we just described, how those who had some of those different definitions, because I think you're right. Like, that's kind of the interesting part of it is I think you and I, which episode was it that we did talked about listening, where we were, just really honest with you all about how much we thought we were good listeners
Oh yeah.
and how much we really had to learn about listening. And I think the same goes for coaching. It's not until you actually had some really decent formal training that it clicked and then it
Mhm.
really kind of shifted my perspective. So it's like I don't think every HR professional needs to go through a coaching program.
No.
It's not what I would say at all, but I think having a general understanding of what exactly it means and how it works, because the coaching, one of the biggest things that I had to learn, because I am not a super patient person, I tend to want to just throw out my answers. I saw advising as coaching all the time. Here's this,
Yes.
here's this, here's this,
Yes.
here's this. And it wasn't until I got some formal training where it was like, oh, shut the up. Shut the hell up
Yeah.
and listen and start allowing them to really come to it on their own. And that's where it kind of started to turn magical for me and anyone who's ever gone through that coaching training. And so that's what I would say. And I know I'm jumping way ahead in our episode now, but it felt right in that moment because that I know for me is where I got tripped up. I had it just completely confused. And now I can just really be there and show up in that way
Yeah.
so much differently. So what
Yeah.
about, was there anything else for you that came up while I went on my ramble?
Well, I think about my last 27 years in HR. I think about how I initially what I understood HR to be, and for all the listeners, Jen and I have both been in HR a very long time. So, in the 90s, I'm dating myself and I'm totally cool with it. In the 90s, I was taught the way I was taught to HR. By the way, there was no degree in human resources in the 90s. You didn't go to school for human
That's
resources.
legit, y'all.
Legit, right? So I had a double major in sociology and business administration. Closest thing that I could think of to go into the HR field. And I was taught to direct. I was taught to say, here's the policy, do it, and that's it, right? And truly, I know that sounds really perhaps harsh, but that is what I was taught to do in the 90s, okay? And then, things started evolving for me. I started to just go into more advisement. And even as of 7 years ago, when I first started my last 9-to-5 role, it was the first time I went into the public sector. I worked for a local municipality. Before that, I spent 12 years. I was in global HR. I was helping a private sector employer go from being an Intermountain West, meaning we were all over the Rocky Mountains. We were a landscape architecture design, urban design and planning firm. And we blew up. We started opening offices in Dubai and Shanghai, and we went global. So I did a lot of advising and what I thought was coaching. And so rolling into my last 5 years in the 9-to-5 space, I remember specifically starting my job and teaming with my fellow new department directors. And when they would say, so we're having a really, really hard time with so-and-so, I want to put them on a PIP. I want to put them on a PIP. And I would say, okay, great. Sounds like the right call from what you've shared with me. Let's, going through the traditional PIP. We have had these conversations on these dates. And if you don't change your behavior, you are subject to further disciplinary action up to and including termination. Classic PIP. So I would go into those conversations thinking the department director had really listened, going back to episode 10 of this podcast, really listened. And what became so clear to me was that the directors were not truly listening to their employees. They were advising. They were saying, do it this way, do it my way, or so-and-so who's successful over here, they go about it this way. And they were making the employee wrong. And so often the employee just had their own way of doing it. And so once I started seeing that repeat pattern happening in my last 9-to-5 role, I was like, there's got to be a better way. There has to be a different way of approaching HR. And I need to show up for my department directors differently. I need to develop a whole new skill set in HR because it's just not working. We shouldn't have all of these PIPs and all of these terminations. Something is not right with the way we're going about the workplace. So I just started getting really curious about it. And then fast forward to now as a consultant, I, work with many different organizations, and I'm watching it happen in other organizations now. For example, if an IT director were to say, well, I learned IT, I worked 60 hours a week, I worked nights and weekends wanting to learn, that's how I learned, and my hire isn't doing that. And I want him to do that. That's being directive and advising, it's not coaching. And I just really believe in the power of coaching. Now who went off on a tangent, Jen? Who just went off on a tangent this time?
well, what's so rad about it though, Katherine, is you're going forward into the next question. So it totally works out just fine.
Look at that. I know, but I want to hear your answer to the question.
Okay, so
We're not skipping over you. Let's hear it.
Let me read the question and then you can see how it worked just so perfectly. And then if there's more to add, please do. But the question is, share an example when you had to adjust your style at the 11th hour. So,
I didn't answer that question.
Oh, then you're in luck.
No. I want to hear your answer. I vaguely tap danced around it. I didn't give a specific answer. I want to hear your specific.
Okay, so years ago, I had a situation happen where we were in a final warning conversation with a leader position, and I was there with my boss, who was also the boss of the individual we were meeting with. And my boss was At the time, I mean, I got along with this boss really well. They were very even tempered. For the most part, they were one of the better bosses I've worked with. In this situation, though, they missed something that ended up coming up during the
Yeah.
conversation. So the conversation started pretty directive, right? So it
Oh,
started very
interesting.
direct
Yeah.
because it's a final warning. So we're sitting down with this individual and we're starting to go through the details, and the manager's the one leading the conversation. I'm there as HR. And very quickly into the conversation, we realized this individual didn't have all the facts. They didn't have some of the data of
Yes.
the warning that we were going to be giving them. And like, it was one of those moments where, like, in my head as HR, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what do I do?
Yes.
Do I stop the conversation? Do I halt it? Whatever. And so all this is running through my head. I look over at my boss at the time, and he looks over at me. We both knew. We both like had that moment that I think you have sometimes when you work with people who just get you and you get them.
Yes.
We had one of those moments where he looked at me, I looked at him, and I just started coaching. And it was like, and it wasn't something that I had yet the training on. So it was a little bit advising.
Of
Still, like,
course.
it wasn't fully, you know, ironed out yet, but it was really one of those moments, and I think many people can relate to that, where you go into a guns blazing thinking that you're gonna handle this situation, god damn it. Right? And then you get in there and you're like, "No, this is not right. This doesn't feel right." And thankfully, because I know many other times in my career, I'll go into a situation where I'm partnering with the manager, the whoever, and they don't catch it. They don't see it, right? they
Right.
don't they don't see the detail, and they keep charging forward. Oh my gosh, thankfully in this situation, he saw it, he looked at me, we were able to address it. And it just goes to show that, like, we gotta be flexible. We have to have that flexibility. You have to be, like, just able to kind of move with the reality of the circumstances, because we don't know it all. We're not perfect. And, so that situation comes up in my mind often when I have those little moments, those
Yeah.
micro moments when you're in a situation, you're in a meeting, even just a meeting, right? And all of a sudden something shifts, and you have a moment to kind of shift to. And whether or not we do or whether or not we don't is something I find fascinating in people.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, okay, I can't wait. I want to hear your story.
Well, I mean, I have so many. I mean, the one that really comes up for me, I mean, it really comes down to being in my consulting role now, and quite literally going back to an IT director who I've been coaching because the organization, the person responsible for the organization, the HR director, they're both like, we've had it. We don't know how to help this person. We don't know how to help this person. And I truly just came at it from a coaching point of view, meaning I'm not making the IT director wrong, right? He is so frustrated with this employee, and he is just doing what he was taught to do, meaning he learned IT from somebody else who said, you do it this way, you put in the long hours. And this employee who comes from a totally different generation is like, in his mind, is like, I don't work that way. I don't learn that way. I learn a totally different way. And when you're just witnessing a director just really struggling and applying the old approach of directing and advising versus coaching versus saying, hold on a second, maybe my way just doesn't have to be that person's way. And it's okay to allow somebody else to have a totally different approach, so long as they are getting the work done, right? Um, so yeah, that's just the most recent experience I've had. And there's what I love is nobody's getting it wrong per se.
Mhm.
We're just doing it in the way that we were taught. And there's
Mhm.
just so much research out there that shows the old way, that directing and that advisement doesn't work because there has to be a sense of autonomy. And if people feel as though they're being told what to do versus I'm making this decision for myself in my own way, that's where the power is. And I think that's where coaching comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Whew, that's really good. That's such a great story that I think, like, yeah, everybody can relate to. So, yeah,
totally.
awesome. Okay, well, this like leads into the next question. So,
Let's do it.
what are the most common misunderstandings between the differences between coaching, advising, and directing?
I think it's because of all the different definitions that are out there. And I recently, so what tends to happen in my business is HR hires me to come in, revamp learning and development. And what happens is sometimes I start coaching HR and then it sort of ripples out into the rest of the organization because HR starts showing up differently in a much more empowered way, more authentic to themselves. They start taking off the HR mask and they just start showing up very, very differently. So then other people in the organization are like, what is going on? And then so I start to coach other people in the organization. So I actually am coaching the person at the top of an organization. And he said to me, he's like, you're not a coach, you're an educator. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean I'm an educator? What do you mean I'm not a coach? He's like, well, I am coaching my kids on how to ski. So when I am coaching them, I'm telling them techniques to learn, right? So you're not coming in and saying you need to do it this way. That was his definition of a coach.
Right.
So in relation to what we're talking about today, it's
Yeah.
advising. He thought the definition of coaching was advising. And I was like, oh, no wonder why you call me an educator. Because I
Mhm.
come in and I just ask a lot of questions and I help people redirect their own minds and come to their own conclusions because I've developed the skills of what we call coaching in modern day. So I thought that was really, really fascinating. And then I started going back to, I was a competitive gymnast growing up. I played all kinds of sports growing up. And no wonder we think about coaching in that way. No wonder there's so much confusion. So that was just really, really powerful. And that just happened within the last couple of weeks. I was like, oh, okay. Now I see why there's so much confusion out there. Because as a coach, I know the definition of what I was taught as a coach, but people see it so differently. So it's just
Yeah.
fascinating to me. It's so fascinating.
Oh my gosh, that is such a great example, and it's like similar to the example I have because the coach that I look up to. So I know we talked, it was last week, right? When we talked about Brooke Castillo or the week before,
Yeah.
is a coach that you have really looked up to, and a coach that I looked up to, which is really awesome, but also like he has kind of both parallels. He used to be a Harlem Globetrotter, and his name is Derek Grant, and he's my coach. And he really talks about that dynamic between coaching in the sports industry and coaching in the reality, the
No
real world.
way.
Yeah, and it's really, really good because I think that's where, we started the episode and talked about this is evolving. And even for people in that sports coaching world, he's like, I'm having conversations with people all the time who are really struggling with it, who are like, do this, do this, do this. I'm
Yes.
coaching,
It's not, it's
winning.
not coaching.
And yet, he's trying to kind of shift that, but it's tough because this is how we were raised. This is how I was coached. I'm like, I am so fangirling that you said you were a competitive gymnast. I didn't even know that. Now I'm like, oh my God. But it's like that's what I wanted to do so bad, but I was tall from the beginning. So I'm like, I'm almost 6 feet tall. I couldn't do it. By the time I was 10, I was done. I tapped out. So anyway, so
And I was a shrinky dink. I was like the shortest kid in class, this little beanpole.
Oh my gosh, I'm so envious. But anyway, I digress. So what Derek talks about is like, so that is like, it's happening real time, y'all. Like this is the reality where people are just kind of getting it wrong, but not because they've yeah, it's because this is what we know. This is what we were
Totally.
programmed. This is so it's a matter of us just changing some of these conversations that we have around what exactly is coaching and why. And the way that you described it earlier in this episode, if you're joining live now and didn't hear earlier, you got to hear earlier because Catherine described it so well. And I think that's it. Like once we really can kind of understand and be able to step outside of ourselves, step outside the ego just a little bit and
Yeah.
recognize that that's really what it is. We are trying to empower these other individuals to get it themselves, to like
Yes.
thrive from their own fire. And
Yes.
so yeah, that was awesome. Do you have anything else on that question before moving on, or was that?
I don't think so. I just wonder, I'm thinking about our listeners right now, and I don't know, maybe we need to give an example of what coaching is. So I think, I guess the best way for me to describe it, when I am coaching a client, I'm flashing back to a very specific woman in HR who I was coaching last week. And when she is struggling with somebody else in the organization, um,
Good one.
instead of saying, here, this is advisement. Here's how I used to do it. In my
Yes.
25 years in it, here's how I used to do it. Coaching is, tell me why it's so important for you to move forward in this relationship. Coaching sounds like this. This is my number one go-to question. What do you want? What do you want to experience? So we're not telling them what they want to experience. It's tell me why. And I think specifically about where I have heard current HR people say, well, I'm going to tell them to show up to work on time. That is a time to direct. And I respectfully disagree. And here's why. When you tell someone to show up on time, you're taking away their autonomy. You're taking away their ability to decide to show up on time. Coaching sounds like this. Tell me why you're late. Walk me through what's going on. Tell me why you're late. Tell me why it is important for you to show up on time. It's a totally different approach, and it needs to come internally, and we need to find out the employees why. Why are they showing up late? Why are they showing up stressed to the bejesus? Why are they, instead of calling somebody out, well, you're micromanaging and that doesn't work here. You're stressing your employees out. Here's how I don't lead in a way that's micromanaging, right? So don't micromanage is directing. Advising is, here's what it looks like not to micromanage. Do that instead. And when you're dealing with a micromanager, it's tell me what's going on with your team. Tell me a little bit more about what you do want to be experiencing with your team. What do they need to be producing? And tell me all about how you're showing up to help guide them. It's very, very different. I just articulated that on the fly. That was not planned. Jen, I want to hear your take on it.
I love that take on it. Absolutely. I think, that's tough for us. I think it was tough for me for a long, long time because it's kind of letting go. It's letting go of that control or that wanting to be able to kind of just make it go away.
And fix.
Right?
You just dive in and you fix.
Yeah, I fix or I just make it stop or whatever my reasons for it are. But I will say that, as somebody who currently works in a grocery, type environment, we got to open that store. It's so like, I totally get the both sides. And I think it's possible to do what you're saying. I think that that's sometimes where we get stuck is it's one or the other, right? We got to go black and white. And if you start at 8, you start at 8. And then we're going to have to talk about that. And then it's really starting to become more fluid and actually being intentional about what that conversation looks like. It's not just, 8 o'clock is the time we open the store, but it's also really starting to kind of go into it a little bit more. And so, yeah, I think it can have, it's got its nuances in that way, but I also think
Mm.
that when people start to kind of challenge themselves and say, okay, I know we started at 8 and I want to lean into this more because
Yeah.
I had one just not too long ago, and then we'll move on, but not too long ago, we had an individual where there was an somebody showing up repeatedly, it was late, 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 late.
Yep.
And finally, we had this conversation with them. I approached it differently than the manager had been approaching it differently. And it was like Pandora's box, right? And the manager's like, whoa. And I thought, yeah, and I think that that's part of it too. In HR, we have to do a little bit of show and tell. We have to actually sometimes kind of show it to them, and then they can see that by taking this approach, by actually, holding the rules. I mean, we got a union contract. We're going to hold our rules, but we're also going to like lean into it from that coaching
Mm.
perspective. And so there is a way to hold both. And so that's what I wanted to add to that, because it's like, yes, I agree with everything you said. And I would say that, for some of us, there are restrictions in the environment. So you have to kind of find a way to overlap and layer them together. And it can be done because I'm doing it.
Right.
Because
Right.
I'm doing it. So it can be done. So, okay, well, let's jump in and let's talk a little bit about empathy, shall we?
Ooh, the
So
E
for
word.
you, what role does empathy play in terms of choosing whether to advise, coach, or direct?
It's everything. Period. Empathy is
Everything,
everything.
period. End of story. Bye,
End of
everybody.
for me.
Signing off.
I just all caps. We're done here. I think and who knows what our listeners feel about empathy. I'm thinking about one woman specifically in HR Empower Hour who just for her own brain, her own experience, she hasn't quite gotten to a place where she believes that empathy is really important in the workplace. And all I know is from my own lens and my own experience. Like, if she can't tap into empathy, okay, that's her jam. For me, the way I want to show up in HR, the way I want to show up for my clients, empathy is everything. And
Mhm,
empathy is just, understanding somebody else's feeling, right?
mhm.
And
Yeah.
for so long in HR, it was so taboo to talk about feelings in the workplace. You didn't talk about that. And it's a complete 180. And I think that coaching is really important to invite a discussion about feelings. And we've talked about this on the podcast that feelings are what drives us. So when we identify the feeling that we're not super happy about versus the feeling that we do want to be experiencing, then we can help coach in a way to help our employees put quite literally literal action steps together to move toward the feeling that they do want. So I think really being able to identify the feeling that the employee does want to experience and helping them put a plan together. I know I just repeated that twice. I think it's everything. I, I do. What do you think?
I think it's I don't know if I'd go so strong as say everything, but pretty darn close. So I think empathy is something that can get us tripped up a little bit. And I
Ooh, do
think,
tell.
yeah. So I do think it's really important. I think it's really powerful, but I also think we have to be careful when it comes to thinking that us feeling everything or trying to put ourselves in a position where we're, can feel
Mhm.
what another's feeling is necessary. Because I think for me, I think especially in my early days of trying to kind of get it right and be more empathetic. And I thought, am I too cold? And and all these years in HR trying to like get it
Ah,
right. And I think I went a little too far a couple of times because it's like you can still be able to have compassion. You can hold space for somebody
mm,
and what they might be going through, but you don't have to go there in terms of what they're feeling or try to feel what they're feeling. And I think that's where I was like thinking, I was overthinking it for a while. And now I can kind of step back a little bit and say, I can hold the space for how they're feeling, but I don't need to actually go into it. Like, and that as an empath, I think that's where I have to like have these boundaries. And so
yes,
I think it just depends on how emotional people are, but I'm a girl who cries at commercials. So,
yes,
so it's
yes,
like I have to be careful in that way. And so empathy I just I'm starting to get it though. I'm starting to be able to do it in a way that feels like it works for me. And so
yeah,
that's what I would say for everyone listening and watching is what works for you? How emotional are
yes,
you just as a person? And if you're going to want to then have that emotional you as you are because we want to be authentic. We want to be able to show up as we truly are. So if that is who we want to truly be, then it's also learning how to be strong enough to have the boundaries to know when to lean in, when to lean out, and when to
yeah,
hold steady.
yeah.
So that would be that's where I would take that.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting as you were talking, I was like, she's an empath. She's an empath.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm an empath.
Good.
So for
We're yin and
me,
yang.
isn't that funny? And it doesn't, so for me, when somebody says I'm super, super frustrated, I don't become super, super frustrated.
Yeah.
So, so, but for me, empathy is okay, I know what it's like when I am frustrated. And that's where I am empathetic, right? So it's not
Mhm.
judging them, it's just having this understanding of their feeling. And as a coach, I call it not getting in the pool. And that
Yes.
brings up a really important visual for me. As a coach, I am not jumping in, I'm not getting in the pool with them and getting all frustrated with them, right?
Mhm.
As a
Right.
coach, I'm sitting sort of like on the pavement, but I'm not saying, stop being frustrated. It's not helping you. That's
Mhm.
being directive, and you're telling somebody how to feel. And as a coach, it's me saying, for me, empathy is I get it.
Yeah.
I get what it's like to be frustrated. And the way I coach my employees out, like if you want to stay frustrated, you can if that's useful for some reason. But most of my clients are like, but I don't want to be frustrated. So I coach them and say, well, how do you want to feel? How do
Yeah. There you
you
go.
want to feel? And let's put a plan together to get you there.
Yeah.
So I just love that you have this awareness of yourself that when somebody else is feeling a certain way, like you're an empath. There's nothing you can do to stop it. And I
Yeah.
love that you have that awareness of yourself because I feel as though a lot of people do.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of
I
people.
think
My very first coach was an empath. And I was like, I have to look that up. What does that even mean? So it's really right because
yeah.
I'm not an empath.
Yeah, and I think so, like, as I've been able to kind of grow myself, you start to learn those people that you work closely with, whether it's coaching them, managing them, leading them, whatever it is, and you start to learn that about others, and that helps too. So all of it, I think, self-awareness is like that goes into the next question. So
I
let's go into
mean,
it because
shut
it's
the
like we're
front
gonna get into
door.
self-awareness. But you know, when you like think about how we can tailor our approach when when we look at coaching, advising, and directing, what what skills, what do you need within yourself to be able to show up and be able to kind of adjust accordingly based on the circumstances?
For me, oh boy, how nerd do I want to get in this answer? Curiosity is a skill. And I think developing that skill of curiosity, recognizing when we're sitting in judgment and really understanding that that judgment comes from the most primitive part of our human brain, and not to beat ourselves up, rather to get curious about our own thoughts and to get curious about the thoughts that other people are having. I think that that is one skill that so many people aren't aware is a skill. The skill of compassion, the skill of, I mean, there's just so many skills. I used to say the skill of confidence, but I'm starting to realize as I dig into more research, I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn. And the skill of confidence is sort of this external, what people tell us develops our confidence, but our self-worth is the internal skill. So I actually think that internal skill of self-worth is absolutely critical so that we can approach any conversation that comes up in HR and truly believe I've got this. We don't have to plan ahead. We don't have to map out what's going to happen. And we also have to realize that the past truly is in the past. And we have to, and no blame or, no shame or blame. It's just show up with an open mind and an open heart. And that's like the human part of human resources, if that makes any sense. It's making sense in my brain. I'm not sure if I'm able to articulate it in the way that I want to at the moment.
I think you're doing great. I think you're doing great. I think sometimes, we get caught up in things, but yeah, I was right there with you. I was right there with you. And I could not agree more wholeheartedly, in what you're saying. I think, it's really been, I mean, it's so funny because I feel like you and I come on here and we're like, oh my gosh, the amount that we've learned in the last couple of years, and we're not bullshitting. We're not bullshitting in terms of the amount that we've been able to learn through self-awareness, through the work of understanding how our thoughts impact our feelings and our behaviors, and all of that is a cycle that just continues to go like a record player. And that I think is just, it's really fascinating because I'll have conversations with people who are pretty close in my life, and we'll have conversations about that, about how much our thoughts repeat, and how, negativity bias, and have these conversations. And it just doesn't, it clicks with some people, and some people it doesn't quite click. And it's like, it's okay. Like, I think some people are kind of living in their lane, and, that's okay for them. But for me, this lifelong learning thing is everything. Like, that I'll put my full stop period on. For me, is be a lifelong learner, be curious, continue to question. Don't ever, if you ever feel like you're holding on to a belief, this is something my coach Derek has told several times. If you're holding on to a belief really tightly, there is something to explore.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Any belief, right? I don't care if it's religion, if it's politics, if it's whatever it is, if we're willing to hold on to it like so tightly, it's something worth exploring. And I think when it comes to sometimes the way that we lead, the way that we manage, the way we communicate, a lot of these things are grounded in beliefs that we truly have come to believe are are our identity, right? I am this, I am that, I am this. And so when you become a lifelong learner, you start to realize, along with every other belief outside of ourselves that we should question, we should be questioning the things about ourselves that are no longer working or that may have an opportunity to actually evolve in the way that humanity is evolving. I kind of feel like I'm on a soapbox. I am not trying to preach at y'all. I'm not trying to like lecture. I just really believe this with my whole heart. And so
Yeah,
it like really, it's like where we talk about passion, this is going to be the passion thing for you and I, in terms of like where we come on this podcast and say, y'all, it does work. It just requires practice. It requires like doing the work. So, oh goodness. Do you have anything
absolutely.
to add with that?
Well, I think about all of the specifically women in HR that you and I, just through social media, that we've connected with. And it seems to be that burnout is still heavy.
So
Burnout
heavy.
is still happening in HR, and stress levels are really high. And the Sunday scaries are still happening.
Mm,
And I just want to echo what you just said. When you're a lifelong learner, when you develop that skill of curiosity and you stop thinking, this is never going to change, it's always going to be this way, this is the profession, my boss is a narcissist, like all of those, what you were saying, those beliefs that we're really, really, really holding on to. And then the coaching that you've received from your coach, if you're holding on super tightly, or if you're resisting something, there's something to explore there. And it's almost like that is the gateway to lessening your stress. That's the gateway to beating burnout. That's the gateway to finally loving your job. It's just recognizing, like, what are you holding on to so tightly, and just explore it. Just get
yeah.
super curious about it, and not in the beat up kind of way. Why am I doing this? Why am I this way? Why am I not smart enough? It's just that shift into, why? And just shifting out of blame and shame and getting curious. Just totally echoing what you said, basically, Jen.
Oh, I love it though. I appreciate it, because it's like 3/4 of the way through what I said, I'm like, I feel like I'm ranting at them. Oh my
No,
gosh. But like I think sometimes that passion around how far we've come. I posted the
yeah.
other day, I was very vulnerable about it, but I went to Ross, the dress store Ross, and
Oh, I love Ross. Dress
it
for
was
less, Jen. Dress for less.
but I was in the dressing room, and it was hilarious because I was buying this set of pajamas.
Yeah.
And Ross is so worried about people swapping the mediums with larges or whatever. And so
Oh, really?
they basically hook your medium to your large, and your medium to your medium and your large to
Yeah.
your large. So it was a two-piece. It was a little tank
Yeah.
top and shorts jammy set. And so I end up taking a picture of me wearing the large bottoms and medium top with the second one hanging on the side, right? So, and I like was standing there in the dressing room, and I'd snapped a picture of myself, and I thought to myself, never in a million years a year ago would I have like taken this picture of myself in a dressing room. And there's so much that like I feel like has happened through the evolution of understanding myself better. And that's
Mm.
really like we can talk so many words about coaching and directing and advising, but really what you and I talk about, the core of this podcast and the core of like so much of what we talk about is really about understanding self, and about like learning us, and what makes us tick, and really what it is we want and desire, and stop holding in, stop,
Yeah.
and so like that moment where I was sitting there in this dressing room with the large, what was it? Large bottoms hanging from my top and the medium top hanging from my bottoms, and just felt more at peace. And you're right. It wasn't so much about confidence. It's not confidence anymore. It's just seeing myself and recognizing from this place of self-acceptance, like it just is freeing. That's the word
Yep.
I would use, is
Yep.
freeing. The
Yeah.
brain, the body, the mind, the heart, everything becomes freeing when you start to really become more self-aware. So, okay. Well, with that, I think we've gone down our rants. Is there anything that you want to wrap up with, Katherine?
No, it's just, I mean, the truth of it for me is I didn't even understand I was standing in my own way. I
Yeah.
didn't understand that, I thought I just had to master FMLA, master ADA, and master open enrollment and just nail and get all of these things and be totally competent, when in reality, that's the building, so to speak. And the foundation is the self-worth. The foundation is,
Preach.
I mean, it just is. And I didn't get it. And I didn't
Yeah.
get it until I turned 45. So the whole reason I want to continue this podcast is I don't want other people to suffer like I did and experience that stress and experience that burnout when there is another way. And I think that's why you and I are both so passionate about it. I feel as though the way we've been socialized, not I feel, I mean, there are studies on this, the way we've been socialized as women, is why we show up in the way we do. It's why we show up, developing procrastination, developing perfectionism. Those are skills. That is not who we are. We're showing up in a way because of how we've been socialized, because of how we've also been taught to do HR. And it kind of comes down to you do you, but in order for you to do you, you really have to do the work to really understand your core. So
Yeah.
I didn't get that. I didn't understand that until I turned 45.
Well, what a freaking great segue into what you're offering right now. So as we're wrapping up, before we wrap up the podcast today, Katherine, you've got some offerings that I want. Do you have like 30, 45 seconds you can share?
Yeah. I mean, just quickly, every single Tuesday, I teach a course called HR Empower Hour. And it's where HR practitioners come together and we focus on a hot topic. And I teach, we discuss as a group, we get really honest with where we are, how we're approaching that current topic. And then every single woman walks away with a customized action plan. So meaning they take the information and you literally go through a coaching questioning sequence. So I'm not directing, people are literally just answering questions, and that just allows them to practice, to take the micro learning and take a small step forward, which is great. It's so fun. And then of course I do private one-on-one coaching as well. So those are the two different things that I do, which is so fun. And I come in to learn organizations and help teach the skill of curiosity, help teach, the antidote to perfectionism, procrastination, all those things.
Nice.
So thanks, Jen. I didn't know you were going to do that.
Of course. So, and everybody, please make sure, if you have not downloaded, liked, subscribed, rated, reviewed, whatever it is on your podcast platform for Thrive and Shine HR, please make sure you do. We are growing by the minute.
Yeah.
And make sure to like our page on LinkedIn. If you haven't heard yet, we do have a LinkedIn Thrive and Shine HR page. We're now over 150, so it means we can start broadcasting live. So we're just growing and thriving, and behind the scenes we've got other exciting things that we're talking about that we'll be talking more about publicly soon. So okay, well, with that, I want to thank you all for joining today. Thank you, Katherine, again for another amazing conversation. And everybody, today and every day is such a great day to thrive and shine in HR. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Jen.